Item 15.
Item number 15 is an ordinance approving a food, beverage, and retail prime concession agreement with Paradise Lagarde at SAT LLC for over 10,000 square feet in Terminal A at the San Antonio International Airport.
Well, good morning, Mayor, members of council. Thank you for the opportunity today to talk to you about this prime concession, food, beverage, and retail. I'm excited to bring this exciting proposal to you forward to recommend Paradise Lagarde as the prime concession for a portion of Terminal A. So now I'd like to take a look at the concept, and I can go through this fairly quickly. I know many of you have seen the pictures, you've seen the brief online. This is a very quick overview of the concepts. I think what you'll find as I walk through these concepts, there are some very, very exciting local concepts mixed with some national brands that do very, very well in airports for a variety of reasons. So you see Chick Fil A on the right side. I did want to mention one thing before I get into the detailed concepts. Chick Fil A was a change after the proposals were offered. There was originally a Panda Express, and that's in the food court area where Raising Cane's is right now. Was originally proposed a Panda Express. The airport and Paradise Lagarde had a bit of a conversation about that based upon a couple of things. One is the types of food we get great feedback on. The chicken venue is actually very, very popular, but also that mix of fast food and healthy food. Chick Fil A being the first fast food restaurant to ban trans fats from their menu, so they've been able to find that mix of fast food and healthy food. And ultimately, we agreed to go out and look if that concept would work. It was a little bit smaller than a typical Chick Fil A, and so they had to make some adjustments in the percentage rent, but ultimately it generated just slightly more in minimum annual guarantee than the original concept, so it would not have impacted the scoring. So here's what it looks like, and I will sort of walk you through that verbally as I picture each concept. I'll kind of show you a storefront and give you an idea of what that will look like, and then be glad to answer questions later. This concept probably doesn't need very much introductions. Founded in 1946, they operate 2,200 restaurants now nationwide, 32 airport locations at 26 different airports. One of the most, if not the most per square foot revenue generator, a very, very popular venue across the country. Won all kinds of awards, and as I said, has taken, since 2008, a leap in healthy food options. So we're excited to see that concept coming to San Antonio as well. And I'll be happy to take your questions. I know we've got a number of speakers, but that concludes our presentation, and we're proud to offer the recommendation for Paradise Lagarde.
One of my considerations here is to make sure that we maintain the integrity of the process and that it's conducted fairly, and I have every reason to believe, as you've indicated, that it was, and ultimately that the result that comes out of that process is one that looks right, that meets the standards that we have as a council to accomplish the goals of local brands, of ensuring that there's a great front door for visitors who come to our airport and who are leaving our city. And it's difficult because I could see that if that process yielded either team, it would have been a great decision. But in the case of this particular procurement, there's a clear staff recommendation, and I don't see any reason to go a different way from the staff recommendation on this item. So I'll be supporting the staff recommendation today.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Carlos. Councilman Trevino.
Thank you, Mayor. And I just want to say that your questions regarding the process to Carlos, I would also echo, and so just appreciate addressing that. And I have to wholeheartedly agree that the airport, and while we remain on this slide here where we see the front and how hard we worked to make sure that our airport is the gateway to the city. We have worked not only in this respect, but all elements of the airport, like our public art, the architecture itself. All that is so important. So in my own personal opinion, I believe all the local partners are clearly passionate, they're committed, and certainly they're invested in our community. And I want to thank all of them for being here today. And while I believe the process that yielded these results, and I wholeheartedly feel the group of San Antonio restaurateurs and restaurants will represent our city in the most positive and authentic light, the inclusion of Chick Fil A as a national brand tenant is something I cannot support. The heart of the LGBTQ community is in District 1, and the community has come together to voice its disapproval of this proposal because it includes a company with a legacy of anti-LGBTQ behavior. The work our city has done to become a champion of equality and inclusion should not be undone so easily, which is why I cannot support the staff recommendation today. And perhaps the Office of Equity and Inclusion should be involved in the vetting of economic deals to ensure they align with our core values as a city. I therefore move to approve staff recommendation with the following amendments: directing staff to work with the concessionaire to secure another concept other than Chick Fil A, consistent with the requirements of the RFP, which will not change the MAG and will not decrease the percentage rent. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilman Trevino. Councilwoman Villagran.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll speak to that in a little while or ask some more questions later. And so that's why it was important to me. And now with this, I think it's a pretty significant change and a well thought of change for changing out that major partner of Chick Fil A. I believe that it would recommend a conversation, or at least let's see it all in the big picture of how this works at a B session. So with that, on top of this motion, which we're going to have to figure out, Andy, how this all plays, if that does fundamentally change something in the agreement. But what I would like to do is make a motion to have this at our next available B session for further conversation.
But we now will take up that motion. Are there any council members who'd like to speak on the motion on the floor? Councilman Brockhouse.
Thank you, Mayor. I want to second my colleague from District 3's points on the matter. I think the material change of the Chick Fil A issue is a lot bigger than just swapping out an organization. I think when you make that kind of move, there's now really twofold pieces here. One is our ability to make sure we have the right vendor, and you know what, my vote is not a rubber stamp. If it was, there'd be no need for us then. If we believe the process is always right every time the process happens, well then what the heck are we here for? So in my opinion, the vote comes to us and we make our evaluation, we make the calls we see fit, and the process has to be right, but we also evaluate the process. It's okay to sit there and evaluate the process. We got to get it as right as possible. But the other point to this is, and I'm not pushing back on Councilman Trevino's call because of Chick Fil A at this point, but I think we should at this point then force every one of these companies to lay out their LGBTQ positions and make sure that every one of them, so let's have the fair debate on that. So at the very least, you can't say, I don't want Chick Fil A without knowing 15 other companies' positions on LGBTQ rights. Now that has become a change, not just a small change to the contract. Follow me here, colleagues. This is a material change in the city's policy regarding contracting, period. Once you say that an LGBTQ business or an anti-LGBTQ business, if that's what you qualify it as, once you say they are not allowed and we're materially changing it, you have materially changed the expectations of the contract of the RFP. Just like we did labor peace when we inserted it behind closed doors, when we inserted it and then took it back out, that was a material change to the RFP. So if we honestly pass Councilman Trevino's assessment on Chick Fil A's, and I'm not here I'm not even questioning your right on that thing. You know what? That's a discussion worth having, 100%. If that's what we're going to do business with and what that means. But now you have changed the expectation for every company applying for this. So let's go back and have an honest discussion. It should now be part of the briefing. Where do you stand, luxury? Where do you stand, local cop? Where's Starbucks on issues that we may have problems with? Now we have to then have a social factor in the RFP process because we're changing it. So to me, that's the larger point here. If we attempt to remove Chick Fil A, we have changed materially based on a factor that is not included in the RFP process. Therefore, we must go straight back to the beginning of RFP and restart the entire thing. So guess what? The right answer from a leadership perspective is to wait, to pause, to bring it back to B session and ask these very difficult but telling questions. Where do you stand on LGBT rights? where are you on this? What is your plan for this? And have a full briefing on it and vet it in the open, because that is a huge change to the city's contracting policy. So I wholeheartedly support my colleague's motion to at least take time. At the end of the day, we take the time. It's been 2 years. We've obviously made changes to this contract off and on the entire term. I think it's worth the fair discussion at this point. This is about, food and culture matter. People come into the city of San Antonio through that airport. It's very important how what perception we put out there, what message we're sending. And I think we have to take a step back and say, Councilman Trevino's brought up some valid points. There are concerns from some members on the briefing time span of this, the size and length of this contract, the lack of a B session, only 3 members viewing it. With that, I think we should wholeheartedly honor Councilwoman Villagran's point and take the time to pause and show leadership. Sometimes the right answer is doing nothing until you feel right about the entire choice before you. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilman Brockhouse. Councilman Courage.
Thank you, Mayor. I want to go ahead, and I was enlightened, I think, by what my fellow councilman just said. Are we going to make this a game changer and start looking at non-critical issues that go into a contract at this case, and then how does that spill over into future cases? I don't want to see this council go that way. I will not support a move to eliminate a particular company because of its social standing from an existing offer as well. So I'll be opposed to both of these. I'll more like support the mayor's original move that we just go forward with the original decision recommended by the staff. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilman Courage.
Because the scoring has already been done. Unless we start this whole process over again, which I'll get to on this other amendment, about deleting a part of the contract, switching them out at this point, that's absolutely no. It might not be illegal, but business practices, who's going to continue to bid for this city? Well, let me get back to the delay thing. But
many of us had a former colleague who was fond of saying, we've seen this movie before. We have seen this movie before, not just on this council, but councils across this country. When you have a process that is refined, that's living up to the standards of ethics and integrity that the businesses that choose to bid in our city can trust, it's very important that we stick to that process, even when it comes up with an outcome that we might be surprised by or disagree with. At the end of the day, the City Council is not a rubber stamp at all. It's our discretion. It's our choice on which, whether or not we approve the staff recommendation. That choice is still one for us to consider. But in terms of maintaining the integrity of the process, making sure that businesses who watch the City of San Antonio, the City Council, can trust what we do will stay fair and level at all times is critically important. And that's why I won't be supporting a delay at this time. So there is a motion and a second for delay of item number 15. Please vote. Motion fails. All right, we'll take up now the main motion. I'm sorry, we did have to take council members off of the queue in order to take that vote. So I'm going to ask you to tap back in if you'd like. I did recognize Councilwoman Gonzalez, though, was next in queue for the main motion. So Councilwoman Gonzalez.
Companies are being brought in or not. There's a discussion here about Chick Fil A. Again, that was a city staff asked that company to bring in Chick Fil A because you all don't have the contact with the public that we do. And there is a lot of people that are not happy with Chick Fil A's and their policies. And if we had the opportunity to see that, we would have had that removed beforehand and not had to do it here on the dais. But regardless if there's a Chick Fil A or not, they still have to produce that mag. And so I'm sure that there is a way for this business to move forward with this one or not, because it's a guarantee. And so it's their responsibility to work their business in such a way that they have that guarantee. So it's really why I'm willing to move forward with this. I do look forward to a different process when there are high-profile contracts that are multi-year, $100 million, that have an impact on our brand. That the council have a greater influence on what that looks like moving forward. But I am prepared to move forward today with the staff recommendation of with what's being presented. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilman Gonzalez. Councilman Pelaez.
Thank you. This is difficult for me also, just for the same reasons that you described, Mayor. I mean, at the end of the day, the representatives of each one of the different teams are friends, and many members of each team are friends. However, one thing that I'd like to dispense with very quickly is any of the two teams, if you are a member of that team and you are not willing to adopt the principles of our non-discrimination ordinance in your policies, specifically and explicitly making sure that members of the LGBTQ community are not discriminated against or harassed if they're employed by you, please stand up. Let me know that you're not willing to do that. I'm satisfied that each and every one of you is willing to live up to that. Carlos, can you get up here and answer a simple question? I'm wondering, does the contract include mention of our NDO and protection for LGBTQ community members?
Councilman, it does. Specifically requires the contracted entity to follow our NDO. We have a city ordinance that requires that. It's not uncommon. In fact, I think it's pretty much in every single contract we entered into where we require the contractor to follow the NDO. That city ordinance is not something that's new. It's pretty well known that the city of San Antonio has adopted an NDO.
Do we have did you hear Mr. Trevino's motion that I seconded?
Yes, sir, I did.
So I want to make sure that you understand it the way I understand it. And that is a motion to instruct you and staff to go find out whether or not we can replace Chick Fil A. Is that what you heard?
What I understood was to go and negotiate with the contractor to find a replacement for Chick Fil A, but to ensure that it does not change the MAG and does not change the percentage rent that was projected by the concessionaire.
So let me tell you why I seconded this motion. For many years, Chick Fil A corporate has been funding anti-LGBTQ organizations that support and advocate conversion therapy for young LGBTQ people. They've also quite explicitly rejected every opportunity given them to include protections for LGBTQ employees from being harassed or discriminated in the same way that disabled employees can't be harassed, or people of different religions can't be harassed or discriminated or fired simply because of who they love. I think in 2019 that's abhorrent, but I also think it would be abhorrent and a violation of my conscience, and certainly a violation of the city's values, if we help, by way of bringing in a restaurant like that, if we help them fund those efforts by making money off of our airport. And if we've got a choice by indirectly helping fund efforts to, continue conversion therapy or continue discriminating against people and really just harming fellow human beings, then I will always choose on the side of trying to not enable that. And that's all this does, is it would enable it. I will tell you that I think that we've fought really, really hard as a city to make sure that this NDO policy is a reality and that it's enforced. It's a manifestation of our values, and it says that San Antonio is a city that welcomes everybody, regardless of whom you love. And I want to make sure that when people traverse our airport, the first thing they see is a San Antonio that is welcoming, and that they not see a symbol that for many people is a symbol of hate. And I think that we can do better. And so I understand their chicken is delicious, and they sell a lot of it, and they make a lot of money, but so do vape shops, and so do lottery machines, right? And I don't think anybody up here would want a vape shop in the airport either. So what I want to do is drive the point home also that, this is a contract that is supposed to produce revenue, right? And I don't want a restaurant that isn't available on Sundays either. I don't care why it is they're not open on Sundays, but I want to make sure that every single one of our guests gets the full panoply of items available to them on every single day of the week, including Sundays. And so I understand that one of the negotiating terms was that we ask them to replace, Panda Express or something like that,
Yes.
which I applaud simply because I prefer other places than Panda Express. But also, I'm sure there's other restaurants that serve delicious chicken, Carlos, and that'll make up the, that could possibly be as profitable as a Chick Fil A.
Councilman,
yes, sir.
I didn't mean to interrupt you, but on the issue of the NDO, we did discuss that specifically with Parodies. They were in full agreement to that being in the contract. And then on this issue of working with the airport to find a suitable substitute, they committed to work with us carefully to do that.
Great. And so we have, and HMS, I appreciate that concession and that expression to work with us. I do want to say that, some folks are going to look at this and say, oh my gosh, you're fighting the culture wars, and here you are, trying to, shove your values down other people's throats. I'm not. I'm just trying to take the culture wars out of our airport and bring in people whose sole purpose is to sell delicious food and make people feel welcome, all people. And if Chick Fil A wants to make people feel unwelcome, they're certainly welcome to do that, at their own restaurants, just not in my airport and my constituents' airports.
Councilman Kerr.
Thank you, Mayor. I want to, redirect the thinking for us from what we've been talking about, which is really almost reevaluating both of these contracts, to the point that was brought up by Councilman Trevino. He made a motion, and it was seconded, and his motion was to go ahead and remove Chick Fil A from any agreement that we may have under the contract that's pending. And we heard, I think, some interesting points brought up by Councilman Brockhouse that, if we do that in this situation, it's worthy of a more formal discussion. What does that mean in many other negotiations we may enter into with other businesses and other entities in the community? And I think that's going way beyond what we should be looking at this time. I just am concerned that if we start picking and choosing based on social issues, then does that mean we don't want to have a certain health group go into the medical center, or we don't want to rent a space to a business on the Riverwalk because what their owner has done in the past, or are we not going to go ahead and allow a building to be rezoned or something because it's going to be housed by atheists or humanists or agnostics or whatever? I think that is going down a very wrong path for this city council to take. So I'm going to reiterate my opposition to his motion, and I just hope that the other council members will give that their consideration too. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilman Courage. Councilman Perry.
Thank you, sir. I want to echo those same exact words from Councilman Courage. I think this is the wrong thing to do at this point in the process. If sometime in the future it's determined that it doesn't fit the NDO, that kind of thing, then absolutely make those changes. But right now, we are dealing with the contract and whether it should be awarded or whether it should not be. Not about pulling teams off of this and setting a precedent for the future. here in San Antonio without having that much larger discussion, whether that should be done or shouldn't be done at this point. So I want to express my opposition and displeasure with that at this point in time in this RFP process. This is not the right time for that. So I equally disagree with that. Thank you, sir.
Councilman Trevino.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to kind of revisit the original motion. Again, at the heart of this is something, we worked this out with staff. We don't feel it's a material change. And bottom line is removing discriminatory businesses regardless of what protected class they are prejudiced against is clearly under the purview of our NDO. And I stand by that. And I think that we have found a way forward so that we can get on with this contract and do the right thing. I think that's what's expected of all of us. And we have had this discussion. From previous councils have had this discussion regarding the NDO. We know it's a tough discussion, but it's moments like this that we need to show that we stand by it. And we want to demonstrate it, all our elements as a compassionate city, from the NDO to things like the Pride Crosswalk that we celebrated last year do mean something in this community. And I want to ask my council colleagues for their support on this motion. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilman Trevino. And we've reached the end of our discussion at this point. We'll go ahead and take up the motion by Councilman Trevino. But just thank you again for everyone's patience today. Thank you to my colleagues for a very thoughtful discussion. I know both teams, as well as our staff, had our full attention on some of the finer points that were discussed. But I will say that at the end of all of this, it's very clear that there really aren't any losers in this process. The only way we could lose is if we didn't maintain the integrity of what we did. And I believe even with all the meandering conversations, we did that. So I'm pleased and I'm proud of the work of the council in this regard. So there is a motion and a second from Councilman Trevino on approval of item 15 as stated. Please vote.
Mayor.
As approval
Mayor.
of item 15 as stated by Councilman Trevino. Do you want to repeat the motion?
Well, if I may, Mayor, the motion by Councilman Trevino was to remove the.
Why don't we have him restate his
if you could
motion?
restate the.
Thank you, Andy. I move to approve staff's recommendation with the following amendment. Directing staff to work with the concessionaire to secure another concept other than Chick Fil A consistent with the requirements of the RFP, which will not change the MAG or will not decrease the percentage rent.
Great. Okay. There is a. Andy?
And thank you, Councilman. And just as a reminder to council, if the motion is denied, there's still an opportunity on a different motion to approve the staff's recommendation as recommended.
Right. Okay. There is a motion and a second for approval of item 15 as stated by Councilman Trevino. Please vote. Motion carries. All right.